Hello, my name is Jonathan Harris from Worldwide Camera Exchange, and today I'm going to run through the checks that you need to make if you are considering buying a Mamiya 7 camera. Now, the Mamiya 7 is available in two versions, the Mark 1, the Mark 2. It's a 6x7cm film-based rangefinder camera. Lenses available range from 43 through to 50 to 65 to 80 to 150 to 210. I'm not going to run through all the various differences between all different lenses and models now. There are plenty of resource online for that sort of stuff. What I am going to do is to talk over the checks you need to make if you're buying one second-hand. So fundamentally there are four areas you need to check. You need to check the cosmetics, you need to check the mechanics, the optics and the electronics. And what I'm going to do now is to run through those four areas one at a time. So first of all, the cosmetics. If you found a camera that you like in a dealer or online and it's been sent to you, then first of all, just look it over, see how clean it is. Any marks on the base, any marks on the top, a few little signs of wear. That's almost to be expected given that the youngest Mamiya 7 you're going to find is certainly 15 years old. They were made from the early 1990s to around the first few years of 2000s. So they were made for just over 10 years and they've been discontinued for, yeah, certainly 15 years now. So when you're buying, you do need to be quite careful. So check out the cosmetics, any wear around here, any wear around the base. Have a look at the lens. This is the 150mm, by the way. Have a look at the filter rim, any marks there. Be particularly careful around the top of the rangefinder because they can get knocked around here. And if they've taken a heavy knock, it can knock the rangefinder out of adjustment. And in extreme cases, there may not be enough adjustment left in the rangefinder mechanism to adjust it back to where it should be. So if that happens, that's obviously an issue. So have a look in the back, there's the little release button there, just pop the back open, look at the amount of wear here. I mean, again, a few little signs of wear, not an issue at all, but you wouldn't expect to see excessive wear. Take the lens off. Now with these cameras, they've got a built-in dark slide, so you've got to remember to close the dark slide. So wind it on, this little wheel on the bottom here, turn that all the way around. That closes the dark slide and enables you to take the lens off. So lens release just here, just release the lens and away you go. Just look at the lens mount, make sure there's not excessive marking or wear on the bayonet, and similarly on the camera, just make sure there's not excessive wear on the bayonet there. If you're happy it hasn't been abused or it hasn't been misused or overly used, then move on to the mechanics. Now the shutter is electronically controlled, so I'll talk about the shutter when we get onto the electronic section. If we're focusing on the mechanics, really you want to look at the aperture mechanism, you want to look at the focusing, make sure they're both operating smoothly. You can look into the lens just to make sure that the aperture is forming a symmetrical shape. To open the shutter on these, again, it's a bit of a performance. First of all, open the dark slide, wind the camera on, and then open the back, and you can now look through the lens while firing the shutter. And you can see the aperture, and you can see the aperture's forming a symmetrical shape. It isn't round, but just make sure it's symmetrical. So as I said, check the focusing, make sure that's smooth. They do this one does squeak very slightly. That's quite a common problem with them, and as a sign it does need a service. So if they squeak like this one is squeaking, it's probably a good idea to get it serviced, and we're going to, as soon as this video is finished, we're going to send that off and get that just get that regraced. So aperture, focusing. You also need to check the rangefinder. The rangefinder is mechanical too. So again, take the lens off. So again, you close the dark slide, wind the camera on, take the lens off. Have a look at this little wheel just here. This operates the rangefinder mechanism and the focusing mechanism. It should spring backwards and be nice and springy. If it's a bit sluggish, if you look through, you can see the frames and the rangefinder moving. If they move in a very sluggish way, that's a sign the camera does need servicing. So that's that's something to be certainly aware of, and certainly make sure that that mechanism is working properly. I've had quite a few cases where those mechanisms become quite sort of sleepy. Have a look in the back, just make sure all this is working. Just have a look at this dark slide. That's the dark slide flicking back open now. Make sure it does flick back open. Once, maybe twice, I've come across that sticking. Make sure it's opening and closing properly like that when you turn the dial on the bottom. Once you've checked those items, you can be fairly sure that the mechanics are okay. So at that point, I'll then move on to the optics. So you need to check the lens. You need to check the rangefinder. Take the lens off, and with a bright light, just shine a light into the lens, both front and back, because obviously there's a shutter. There's a shutter in there, so you've got to check it from both sides, just to make sure that, first of all, there's no misting or fungus inside. Fungus looks like spots with sort of spidery legs, or sort of spider web type effect across the glass. Also make sure that there's no excessive dust inside. A little bit of dust is quite normal, but you don't want anything excessive. So make sure front and back it's clean. Also check the front and rear elements for scratches and coating marks. With the oldest equipment, that's quite a common problem. Now, scratches don't necessarily affect the performance, but they will affect the resale value of the equipment. So if you come across a lens that's a bit scratched on the front, you could probably get quite a good discount on it and get a good usable lens. The other thing to check with the glass, with the optics, is the rangefinder. Again, just shine a light into it from both sides, from the back and from the front. You've got the viewfinder window there and the rangefinder window there. Shine light into both of them just to make sure they look nice and clean inside. And if they do, you're good to go. So you've checked the cosmetics, you've checked the mechanics, you've checked the optics. And the final thing is the electronics. Now this is where we come back to the shutter. Open the dark slide, wind the camera on, open the back. And as I said, you can now see the shutter is firing. Check on a second. It'll click, it'll open, it'll close. You're not timing a second. Fire it 2 or 3 times. Make sure the sound is consistent. Move up to a 500th. Again, just check it. Look through it and fire the shutter. You're not timing it. What you're doing is making sure it is opening. So if you see a little flick of light, that's good. It's opening. Often with these shutters, if they're failing, they'll not open and close properly on the slow speed, and sometimes they won't open on the high speed. So as long as you can see light on the high speed, and you can hear it opening and closing at roughly a second on the slow speed, you're okay. Now with the Mamiya 7, and actually with Mamiya 6 cameras, which is the 6x6 version of this, there's one other check that you must do. Stick it on perhaps an 1/8 of a second. I'm sorry, I have to leave the back over this. 1/8 of a second, fire it. Fire it again, fire it again. Click, 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 click each time. You need to do that 30 or 40 times. The reason of doing this is that occasionally with these cameras, there is an electronics fault where the shutter will start to misfire. And the easiest way of spotting the shutter is misfiring is on that particular speed, on an 1/8 or a 1/4, and just fire over and over and over again. And if you hear it go click rather than click click, you've got a misfiring shutter. We've come across that on a number of occasions. We've managed to fix it on all but one. On the one occasion we didn't fix it. It needed new circuitry inside and the electronics weren't available, so it wrote off the camera. Now when you've spent £1,000 or £1,500 or £2,000 on a camera, you don't want to be in a situation where you can't get the spares. Spares aren't made for these indefinitely. Some of the spares are very difficult to get hold of, so do check that one very, very carefully. And do also, as an aside, be aware that when you're buying this equipment of this sort of age, there is a chance that one day it may not be fixable. Now they are fundamentally very, very reliable cameras, and it's very unusual to have any sorts of problems at all. And if you do have a problem, 9 times out of 10, it'll be fixable with a good repairer. But there is always an outside chance that a component will fail, that component isn't available, and so effectively write off the camera. If that worries you, then don't buy into the system, because there is always a small chance you'll have that issue. Okay, so you've looked at the electronics control of the shutter, and hopefully that's fine. Also, have a quick look at the meter. I'm going to wind it on. You've got the meter reading along the bottom. Just make sure all the LEDs are lighting as they should. It's also worth just sticking it on automatic as well, and just seeing that the reading you're getting in the viewfinder is the reading you're getting. So again, on the slow speed, stop it down to f22. It'll read half a second or a second. Fire the shutter, click, click. You know it's firing on the right speed. Open up to 4.5, point it towards a window maybe. It'll flick up to a 500th. Make sure it's firing on 500th. It'll go click. Take it down to maybe a quarter of a second. Click, click. So you'll hear that the meter is responding to the light change. So once you've done that, you've checked those main 4 areas. You could also put a film through. Some people do like to put a film through. The one thing I'd caution is don't just rely upon a film, because there are some things that films don't pick up on. If you're going to use a film, great, but also go through the checks I've just mentioned. If, for example, there's fungus in the lens or a spot of fungus in the viewfinder, you won't necessarily spot that with the film. And you certainly won't spot the shutter misfiring if you're only putting through 10, 12, 24 exposures. So films, yeah, great for checking the focusing and everything else and the lens sharpness, but do go through these checks as well, just to be on the safe side. So, you've checked cosmetics, you've got a tick. You've checked the mechanics, you've got a tick. You've checked the optics, big tick. And you've checked the electronics, tick. Fantastic. If you've passed all those checks, then you can be fairly confident this is a good camera, and it's a good camera that's going to serve you well. So, I hope you found that useful. If you have, please like this video. Otherwise, stick any comments in the box below. I'll always respond when I can. And I hope to see you again soon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.